did you guys know that you can actually use the skills that you are currently using in your job to actually create a business?
Join us today as we have a discussion with our friends, Samuel and Robbi, I Can Win, about how they went from grade school teachers to teaching people how to build real estate empires.
Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast. We have Robbi and Samuel I Can Win with us today. Good to see you guys. And thanks for coming and hanging out with us. We've known you guys, known of you guys and known you guys for probably a year now, right? Has it been that?
Oh, it's got to be that long, right?
Maybe even a bit longer. Yeah. 2021. I think we connected first challenge 2021 around September. So that's now in 2023. So just a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I love you, everything. Every time I hear you, I love your energy, and I love, I've heard bits of your story and stuff, and I love it. And so I was so excited that you guys agreed to come on and chat with us and share your story with us. So, before we start, I actually want to go back to what did you guys used to? I know you're entrepreneurs now, and you have a lot of real estate stuff, which we'll get into. But what did you used to do? What was your life like before you started in this whole entrepreneurial world?
Great question. That's a great question. Firstly, thank you guys for the invitation.
Yes.
Because, we can only honor an invitation that's made. So we appreciate that. And in terms of our backgrounds, we both come from educational backgrounds, which is weird because my dad wasn't a teacher. My mom wasn't a teacher. Robbi's mom kind of was in ministry circles, but her dad wasn't a teacher, even though he worked in schools. So we both come from an educational background. My background is literally just being on the streets committing crime. I decided.
Hey, him too.
I've got a friend in Zak.
There you go. So I was the ministry background. He was the.
I don't know what I was on the street.
It's so similar.
I don't know that I was on the street committing crime, but I was not always the do-gooder in house dad.
Okay. So
you committed. You just didn't get caught. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I got caught. So I got caught enough for both of us, Zak.
Okay, well, you could own that. I was no catching here.
The key is that was part of my transformation. So it's powerful. We're talking about that. But interestingly enough, my dad and mom separated when I was 6 years old. Fast forward to living with my mom up until 11, and my mom got basically made redundant. She was working for a bank in London. 15 years she worked for them, and then one day they just, oh, your name's on the list. So they sacked her, and I remember seeing that as an 11-year-old, hold on a minute, I can't help my mom. I don't have any income. I can't do anything. And then my mom struggled to try and sell her house with speed, which is kind of how the whole real estate thing really started for us. But seeing that as an 11-year-old, I did some basic maths. I was like, well, hold on a minute. My mom had a normal job and it didn't seem to work out because someone else was in control of her time. My dad always had his own business, but he never looked flashy. And I, as a child, thought flashy means rich. So because I never saw him looking flashy, I assumed he wasn't rich, and I assumed that having your own business didn't work. Obviously going to work didn't work, so you have to choose crime. So I chose crime at 11 years old, and literally up until around 18, 19, when I kind of had my aha moment, that's what I was doing. And when I had the aha moment, it was all about do what your mom and dad said, go back to school. So I went vehemently, studied 4 degrees, degree after degree after degree.
How many degrees do you have? Gotta ask.
3 degrees. One of them I actually failed. So I've got 3 degrees, studied 4. A lot of.
And then you were a teacher.
Yes, and then I became a teacher. So Robbi was also in teaching as well. So
yeah. What's your background, Robbi? You said you were not on the street committing crime. Congratulations on that.
I was born and raised in church, but I basically said from early I wanted to be a teacher, but kind of went down the side of psychology and said, I'm going to be a child psychologist. I love children, as you see. So I was just like, I'm going to focus on child psychology. And then I said, what? I think it was just before we got married.
Just before.
I said, okay, I'm going to go into teaching. And I was a primary school teacher. So over here we have primary and secondary. So primary are below the age of 11.
Yeah, so all the way from 5. If you include preschool, so nursery, so
3 to 11
years old.
Yeah, and Samuel was in the secondary school side, which is from 12 to
11 to 16. Yeah. But if you include the A level, the college years, so 11 to 19, 18, 19.
So I had the young ones, he had the older ones. which was quite funny. That when we met, that was kind of our thing. We didn't plan that at all.
And now you have like a whole school of your own, right?
That's it. I've got my own.
How many do you? 5. Okay, 5. And what are their ages? They're from like
our youngest right now is Jaira, and he is 4 months old as we speak. We have Daniel, who is 3 years old. Right. Then we have Zechariah, who is 5 years old. Then we have Elijah, who is 8 years old. And then we have Abigail, who is 9 years old. So we have
one girl, 4 boys. Did I get that right? And the girl's the oldest, and then boy. You got a busy house.
And so all primary school. So here soon, you're going to get to pass off all the education to Samuel because it's going to be secondary.
I'm just hoping Samuel's ready for that. It's coming soon.
So you guys were... Sorry, go ahead, Samuel. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
That's why I'm trying to learn to make as many offers as I can right now.
That's right. He's got to have the time to commit to all that later.
Pay somebody else to do the secondary.
Exactly.
That's great. So you guys were and so you were teachers working full time, both of you working teachers. As you grew your family, did one of you get out of teaching, or did you stay in, or how did that work?
So what happened was, when I was training to be a teacher, which was in our first year of marriage, I got pregnant. So we were married for 7 months and I got pregnant. So while I'm training, I was pregnant. And by the time I'd finished training, I was 1 month away from when you'd get a job in teaching. So our term start in September. And my baby was due in November. And I was like, there's no point in me going into teaching. I'm going to have to come out and go on maternity leave. Let me just take the year out. And then whilst that was with Abigail, whilst she was 5 months old, I was pregnant again with Elijah.
So you never really got into the teaching, did you?
No. So, I was shocked, but yes, pregnant with Elijah. So I literally had like 2 babies together, and I wanted to go into teaching, but I was like, I can't. I've got 2 babies. What am I going to do with them? I can't just send them somewhere. So it's only when I think Elijah turned 3, so Abigail was 4, Elijah was 3, I said, I would like to go back into teaching. So I went back into teaching, and it wasn't all that I thought it would be. I spent less than a year in teaching. The children were lovely. I would stay if it was just the children, but the politics that came with it, working with adults that think that they're children, and it was a lot of politics in the school. And I said, what, I can't do this anymore. No, I didn't even say I can't do this anymore. I was ready to stay and fight it out. You have to do 1 year of theory and 1 year of practical. So I was in my year of practical, and I heard the Lord say, go and get your children and homeschool them. And I was like, but I'm in the middle of my first job. Like, what do you mean? And I was like, okay, Lord. And then it came out that my signature had been forged by one of my mentors when I was teaching, because you're meant to have a mentor in the first year that you're practicing being a teacher, and she had forged my signature on some documents, and it was kind of like, oh, so now I have a reason to tell them I'm leaving, because before it was like, what am I going to tell them I'm leaving, Lord? I'm telling me to go. What am I going to say to them? That happened, and by the end of 2016, I had left that job and was homeschooling our children full time. And then I got pregnant the month after I left.
So in the middle of all this, so you're kind of transitioning, figuring out your way, and God called you home. Meanwhile, Samuel, I take it you were still teaching in all the politics, and were you loving it?
100%. Similar to what Robbi said, it's powerful, Laura, because the children are so amazing. Like when you're with children who are gifted, like, and all children are gifted, who are talented, and all children are talented. Like, you're having like a mind-blowing experience every single day, just seeing how children are struggling with certain challenges, and then they overcome those challenges, and then they blossom and bloom and become someone else. They become adults and come back years later and say, hey, sir, do you remember when I was this, this troublesome child, and now I'm well behaved? And I think that was the awesome part. But again, like Robbi shared, it's like, a lot of the UK schools, I assume it's everywhere in the world, you deal a lot of the time with politics. You deal with adults who can't understand why children act like children, which obviously shows that doesn't make any sense. So it's like the adults actually acting like children. So it was real interesting as an experience. It was challenging, taxing mentally, psychologically, physiologically. And I just kept saying to myself, like, I know this isn't my path. I know there's a higher calling. But I was kind of in a weird place, because I felt as though I was in teaching, cheating myself. And what I mean by that is like a number of years ago when I was like 18 and I decided, you know what, I'm going to be doing the right thing for my life. I felt like the Lord was saying to me, oh, Samuel, I'm calling you to preach. Like, and I said to myself, like, okay, well, I don't see myself as a pastor. So if I'm going to go into some form of full-time ministry, maybe what I should do is become a teacher so I can generate a salary. And then if I can generate a salary, I can also practice learning how to become whatever God's calling me to be. And that was kind of like the mental syntax I used to get myself into teaching. And then when I was in teaching, I started realizing, no, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is not it. But sometimes we need hindsight to look back and realize, like, oh, that's how you got there. You actually got there because you tried to deceive yourself. You tried to make it about, okay, how am I going to pay my bills? I'm going to need to do this, to train to do this. And a lot of the time now I look back and think, like, you don't need precursors to purpose. You just need a purpose. Like, you need to walk in your purpose and your highest purpose, regardless of how far away it seems, regardless of how big it seems. You just need to walk in the calling and allow God to train you, develop you, and make you who you're going to be. And you know, life throws enough curveballs at us for us to train en route to purpose. So yeah, that's one thing I've really learned.
Amen to
Yeah.
that.
I mean, and it's so hard because I think that a lot of us naturally are kind of fearful of stepping into our calling. So we like sidestep and we're like, well, this is kind of close. We'll kind of do this.
Exactly.
But you know what? The awesome thing is, and it sounds like God did it in your life too, is he uses our sidestep to actually grow us into and develop the skills in us that we actually need to do the other thing, which is what we're really called to. So that's so cool. Now, when did you start to step out of, how did you go from, because now you obviously are not teachers, either of you. Well, you are, but a totally different kind of teacher.
Not primary school teachers.
And not school education system teachers, but you teach adults and all sorts of people. But how do you, what was it that shifted and what went off in your head? What was the thing that made you start thinking, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, get out of one and into the other? How did that shift happen?
It's a great question. Do you want
Yeah, I know. For me, I when I'd come out of being a teacher myself, I saw how little time. First of all, I knew how little time I spent with our children when I was teaching. But then when I stopped teaching and Samuel was still teaching, how little time I saw him and how little time they saw him, I was like, this can't be life. This can't be life. The teachers at the school spend more time with my husband than I do. And, other children are benefiting from my husband more than my own children. I hated it. And I remember constantly saying, Samuel, this isn't fair. We need to see you more. The children need to see you more. And I just remember, Samuel can share it, but there was a time where Abigail was turning 1 and we weren't doing anything because we were both working. So it was kind of we were working at the time, wasn't it? Yeah, and I said, okay, we're not going to celebrate her birthday, but at least let's do something for her after we finish school. Let's say happy birthday or whatever. And do you want to continue the story?
Yeah, so it's interesting. For me, there were several instances, but this instance Robbi's talking about was definitely a major contributing factor. So at the time, I had just taken my first promotion in a new school. So they're paying me an extra $6,000 a year. And the job they gave me was a deputy head in charge of mathematics. So I've got some label. And basically the school on the same day as Abigail's birthday were doing an open evening. So in an open evening, what they do is they open up the school in the evening to all the primary schools in the area, so that children from primary school who next year are going to be in secondary can come and see the school, meet the teachers. So it's my daughter's birthday. So I basically said to my line manager at the time, can I take the evening off? I leave home at 6:30 a.m. When I leave home, my daughter's asleep. Typically on a normal day, get home 6:30 p.m. and I end up with 30 minutes with her. And she was kind of Gyra size. She was small. She was a baby. She was probably she was 11 months. She's about to turn 12 months to have her first birthday. And for me, it was okay, if I can get home at 6:30 as normal, spend 30 minutes with her, at least I said happy birthday. And my line manager at the time was like, yeah, that should be fine. Just submit a form for like the day off or whatever, or the evening off. And now, mind you, this time I'm asking off isn't contractual time. Like, this is evening. This is after school's finished. This is
It's extra.
they're putting on, which technically I'm not contractually obliged to have to work. And she's asking me to fill in a form. So I said, okay, I'll fill in the form. But I kind of knew from there, like, there's something wrong here. So I filled the form out, and the request was denied. And interestingly enough, I ended up having a conversation with someone, and they said to me, you do know that there are other teachers, like in the UK, we got this thing called MOT. It's a certification you need on your car. So you can't drive a car in the UK unless you have an MOT certificate. And someone says to me after the approval was denied, the request was denied, they said, you do know there are senior leaders in the school who take a day off just to go and get their car an MOT certificate. And like, I can be, at that time in my life, I can be triggered very easily. And that triggered me, because that was like, are you telling me that these people see my child as less important than a certificate on a car? So, that day meant a lot to me. Like, I think that evening I literally wrote my resignation letter, handed it in the next day. And in teaching, you have to wait like 3 months or to the end of a term to leave. So I waited out the time, and I left the school. And that was kind of like the beginning of the end of doing that stuff, of selling my time for money, especially to people who, and I say this a lot on like the trainings we do now, especially to people who don't even know the name of the loved ones who you actually work for. Because it's one thing to go and work and put in 8 hours a day each day of the week, but you're working 9 times out of 10 for people, managers, line managers, supervisors, head teachers, who don't even know, oh, Samuel comes to work for Robbi, or Samuel comes to work for Abigail, etc. Like, they don't even know. And that stuff really grieved me. It was like, no more will I do that. I don't want to serve those kind of people ever again. So
he had a similar experience in the sense of he wouldn't see Jake and our son like for sometimes 3 days at a time.
Basically 3 days at a time, right? Because I was an hour away, and he went to, like, I was leaving at 5:30, and I wasn't getting home until.
You work 12-hour days, so
I worked 12-hour days, but I was an hour away. So basically, I had 14-hour days, and so like I wouldn't see him. And then, we had all kinds of other things that happened that brought us to the realization of how precious life is, and, all those things. And we don't have time to go into that, but like, so I feel that, like, that is a similar feeling, right? Like, as
a dad, you want to be there for your kids,
100%.
All that, and to have somebody else dictate that time is not acceptable. And
it sounds like you guys actually enjoy being married to each other. I know some people don't, but we actually enjoy being married to each other. And so we're like, I actually want to see him.
Right. And spend time together, right?
Like, it's funny, during COVID, some people were like, oh yeah, I have to work at home. And he was not, he was mandated to work still. He was considered whatever that thing was.
Essential.
So he had to go to work, and people were complaining that their significant other was home and annoying them. And I was like, I'd give anything for him to work from home,
And I'm the guy trying to make deals. I'm like, can I just work like 2 days from home? Or like I was like with my managers, I'm like, how about this? Like, I was constantly like wheeling dealing. I'm like, well, we could do this. And they're like, no. I'm like, y'all suck. Like, I was so mad. All these other people. So.
But it sounds like you guys were in that similar position of like, hey, like, life is more, like, there's more to life. And I love how you put it. You're like, I'm working for people who don't even care about what I care about. They don't even know who it is I work for. Right. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
So you put in your resignation, and were you like freaking out? Like, what am I going to do to provide for my family? Or were you like, cool?
I think there were elements of that. Like, here's the things, like, there's a lot more to the story, but the key is like, that was, like I said, the beginning of the end. So I ended up working in another school, getting paid way more, which kind of at the time felt like a little, I told them. But interestingly enough, it was only a matter of time, less than an academic year, before politics arose there. And I remember sitting in a meeting with a senior leader, and he said something like, oh, we have no other, like, this is, he said to me, this isn't like a disciplinary meeting, but it just has to be on record. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm not a 4-year-old. Like, what
You see that?
doesn't even make sense. And you're saying that to an adult as if it makes sense. So then he said, well, we've got no other option but, and the minute he said that statement, we've got no other option but, it's like God just brought to my mind a statement that I heard years ago from John Maxwell. And that statement was, leaders always have options.
That's right.
And he said, we've got no other option. And I'm just sat there and I just hear, leaders always have options. And what hit me was, I didn't know what my options were, but I knew I was a leader. So I automatically knew whatever he was about to say didn't apply to me. And then he went on to say what he was saying. And literally, I went up to my classroom at the end of that conversation, wrote my resignation letter, and that was when I left that job.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about us is, so we got married in 2012, and I've been interested in creative property investing strategies since 2004, 2005.
Okay.
So I've been studying this stuff and doing bits of it, but never really like going full steam ahead. And when we got married in 2012, Robbi was always encouraging me, look, Samuel, I don't know anyone who knows more about real estate than you. You should go into this. You should focus on it. You should make it your main thing. And I think one of the real realities about the whole thing was, yes, I knew lots about it. Yes, I had done lots with it. But it's like when you don't have like a focus, because you're juggling work, you're juggling life, you're juggling all of these things. Sometimes, like we said earlier, you don't just go full steam ahead in your purpose. And I felt called like to the area of property and real estate. I literally felt this was one of the things God really wants me to do. So literally by handing in the job, that resignation, this second time at that job where the guy said, look, you don't have options, there was an element of, I don't know what I'm doing in terms of uncertainty, but there wasn't really any anxiety. There wasn't I'm going to lose or anything like that. Because of how the thought came at the time, it made me realize, Samuel, you don't always have to know your options. You just have to know you are a leader and thus you have options. So even though you don't know what the options are, walk as a leader, walk as someone who has options. And I took the option that day to do something he never would have thought I would have done from that conversation, just to express like, okay, I've got options. I don't know what they are, but I'm exercising one of them right now. You know, so yeah.
That's so cool to think that you actually, the entire time you're going through all this, you actually had everything you needed. Like you were already doing what you were like do now. It's just, it was over here instead of the main focus. I feel like that's probably true for not everybody who goes into entrepreneurship, but oftentimes we have passions and desires and things that we're good at and do, but we're kind of like, oh yeah, they're kind of over here, you know? That's so cool. So you like were like, okay, no, I'm going to make this the primary thing. Now I got to ask, like between the two of you, all right, is one of you a little bit more like, what's the word? Like, hey, like, let's just take the risk and just do it. Or one of you more, which one's more? Okay. I was going to guess that, but I didn't know. So you were like all in, you're like, let's do it. And you're the more conservative, like
Super analytical. Samuel's Mr. Super analytical, and Robbi is Mrs. I've already told you for the last 2 years, let's do this thing.
So don't ask me.
She's like, God told me it's going to be all right. Let's go. So we're the opposite. I'm a little bit more conservative. He's a little bit more like, we're going to figure it out, you know. But the cool thing is God typically puts one of each because you kind of balance each other. So Robbi was all in and you were like, okay, I guess I'm doing this thing. So then like, how did you like what happened then? Did you just go ahead and start doing it or what did you do?
From my memory, I remember I just had this confidence that if Samuel left the working job, that he's just going to be like amazing in what God's called him to do. Because I could just see it, like as soon as I met him, the day I met him, I just saw greatness on him. And I was like, he's going to blow this out of the water if he just focuses on what he's meant to do. Because I could see he was kind of trying to use things to distract him. So like, he didn't have to do certain things.
She had your number, man.
And it was just like, I just knew that once he gets focused on what God's called him to do, he's going to be amazing. And it was interesting because I think the first maybe 2 weeks when he left the job, he just kind of went really quiet. Like you didn't see him much. He was either in the office or he was sleeping. And I was just like, Lord, what happened? I thought, I just knew that he was going to blow this out of the water. That ain't happening, Lord. What's going on with Samuel? But I think he was just kind of processing, okay, I've got to do this. How do I do this, Lord? And yeah, I think it was a bit much at first, like not having to go to work
It was
And
new. It's
yeah,
like,
it was
it's like
exactly
anything.
yeah.
It's new. You don't like. How do you deal with a new baby for the first time?
Yeah.
You don't know. So there's like it's interesting because we talk to couples a lot, and one of the things we always talk about is some of the most important things in life. There's no training for, like real estate and property. There's no conventional school where you learn how to invest in property, and unfortunately,
Over here.
in the UK,
Yeah, because
it's,
there is in America.
well,
I don't think that not traditional.
I don't know that there's conventional.
it's like you have to
No.
train to be a realtor. It's not that. It's not.
Oh, really?
It's exactly the same as it.
Yeah, you could train to be a realtor, but that's not really like
That's
investing.
not going to school and everyone learns it, but everyone
No.
has to buy a house, or everyone's expected to buy a house, or everyone has to at least rent a house. Everyone has to live somewhere. So
Right.
these are basic skills. Like in the UK, I think you guys have like the GED. We have GCSEs, General Certificate of Secondary Education. And I always say, if it's a general certificate, you should teach things that are general. Living in a house is general. How do I get a house? How do I rent a house? How do I buy a house? I don't know. And you don't teach me in school when you're giving me a general certificate of secondary education.
And no taxes.
That makes no sense. You don't.
But you know your grammar, and I just
So you can be very eloquent as you complain about the fact that you don't know how to pay your bill.
that part.
This is the
That
crazy
part.
stuff. So I think for me, those 2 weeks were really me like having a light bulb. Like I know I've never been taught how to be an entrepreneur, even though I know inside of me I'm an entrepreneur. I know I'm called to solve problems. Like my understanding of an entrepreneur, the definition is just someone who solves problems for other people and gets remunerated for it, gets paid. So for me, it was like, how do you do this thing? Like, how do you practically do it? Because now I'm in the thick of it and I don't know how. So I think those 2 weeks for me were really about processing it and kind of, all right, you don't have to be somewhere at 9 a.m. And if you don't have to be somewhere at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to tangibly do that's going to generate revenue for you?
Yeah.
So,
You know what's crazy is it's a real thing. What you just described, that 2 weeks, and it lasts, I think, a different time for everybody. Like people don't realize if like they're in a job right now and they go to entrepreneurship and they leave a job, there's this real thing. He called it detox.
Well, somebody else called it detox, and it was just like, oh, like,
and he said corporate detox,
yeah,
but it's
'cause
just job
worked in
detox.
corporate, but like you're detoxing from the system that your body is used to, right?
Yep.
Like my body feels like it needs to be somewhere,
Be in high stress,
and have this like certain level of stress and like this certain level of movement, right? And then you take that away and your body goes, what are you doing? And like it freaks out, right? And so you just have, like, it's this battle, right? There's this inner battle of my body's trying to get me to do something and my mind's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. But then it's like, well, then what are we doing? And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Like I gotta, like, it's just this like, okay, I got to get into this new rhythm. And then your body like finally
and then
starts
there's a
to get
level,
into that.
it's just a different, because you're trained, right? I mean, from a kid to go to school from 9 to 5 or whatever it is.
Yep.
And then you go from there, you go to college, and then you go from there, you go to work, and it's like all these things. And like one of the reasons we want to homeschool our child too is we don't want to train them to do 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But there's a real thing that your body is like, your mind and body is trained to do that. So it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you, and you're like, wait a minute. And I did the same thing to him. I'm like, you okay? Like, what are you doing? Like,
Exactly
do
what
something.
Yeah.
I was literally like, come on, wake up, come on, we got something to do. Like, this isn't how it was. I didn't envisage this. Like,
Yeah.
no. Like, I honestly thought, Lord, what have I done? Have I encouraged him to do something that was out of your will? I thought this was it, Lord. And it just felt so weird because it was like, I did not know this was coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting time.
She got a little worried, but she was okay.
I did, and it was interesting because it was like once he'd kind of got into the rhythm of, being Samuel, it's like you started to see people really drawn to him and notice the greatness in him, and a few, like, I don't know what you call them, partnerships came up and then it kind of felt like again we was back at that stage where, okay, like kind of like you're working for someone again, although it wasn't in the typical conventional sense, but there was like people that were like, oh, he's good, like we're going to take advantage of him, and we were kind of there again. And I was like, no, Samuel, you're great, you need to get out of this. No.
So you kind of did like agency-esque stuff for a little while? Is that like, or how would you describe that?
So I think there was one particular business partnership we did. There was one particular business partnership we were talking about doing, and there was another thing that we kind of got into, and it's like all of these things were in real estate. They were all property related. The issue was, it's like these were all someone else's business.
Yeah.
So we had our own business, which was all legally formed, etc. But I think going back to what Zak was saying, like, you know, that corporate detox is like the other way I see it, or it's the same way, is like it's like a corporate cold turkey. Like you're literally been addicted to something. Like I talk about this a lot, about how a salary is like a hit of some form of a drug, of a hard drug. And people get addicted to that. They get addicted to that. Every 30 days it came in, you know, and if it didn't come in, like they would freak out. Like, and one of the things I share with people is, for me, the actual hardest drug out there in society is not heroin or cocaine. It's actually salaries, because people are so dependent on them, and their whole world will be destroyed the moment that doesn't come in. And I think for me, it was still in the system. Like, okay, you know, like Zak said, like, okay, I got into a rhythm, like Robbi was kind of alluded to, of, okay, I now know I'm doing something different to a job, but that anxiety around I need to get paid within a certain period of time is still high. So I guess that got me into connections, relationships, transactions, where they weren't necessarily entirely favorable for me. They weren't what we focus on now, which are win-win like connections. Like you win, I win, everybody wins, like, which is definitely doable and definitely how things should be done. But when you work with people who have a scarcity mindset, like a lot of the time they're going to look at you like, okay, you're a pawn on the chessboard. How can I maneuver you to benefit me? Rather than, no, we're not playing chess. This has got nothing to do with chess. Like, we're children of God. We're made by the Most High. Every one of us has a gifting. Let's bring that together and exponentially make a whole lot more than any one of us could make on our own. So
that is so powerful. Like, because you're right. It's not, it's the salary. In the salary, what does it represent? It represents security. But it's really not. It's just what we've been told is security.
It's false security. Yeah. So your salary was an addiction. So what I always saw in corporate, at least where I was, because I was in manufacturing, was this addiction to crisis management, right?
People love.
Right. So people love this crisis and this, like, because it's busy work and they feel important, right? So like those two things coupled together is corporate and jobs to me, right? It's, yes, I'm getting paid for crisis management, and I love my crisis management.
It makes me feel good.
It shows off how important I am, because nobody else can manage all these crises. So that's why you pay me the salary, right? And like removing both of those at the same time is just like this.
It's a lot. Like, a lot of people go back,
right?
Because they're like, I can't handle it. Have you noticed that? Has that been your experience? Because you work with a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
100%.
definitely. I think a lot of the people we've spoken to, it's like, I think there's two big camps. I think the biggest camp's the one I'm going to talk about, but I think one of them is the people that try and basically die in terms of the entrepreneurial side and go back. And I think the other group of people are the people who never actually take the leap. So like they're always trying to, like, the term, you know, they're getting ready to get ready, like they always want to do a side hustle. And I think if you look on just like the YouTube or Google, like side hustle, like you'll probably have more hits for videos and searches for side hustle than actually building your own business, when building your own business is what you're trying to do when having a side hustle.
Right.
And I think the reason is people are afraid to actually take the big step.
It's like, which are you actually more focused on? Because what you focus on, you bring about. So if you're actually focused on side hustle versus building your own business, it's actually going to be different. So when you teach people, like, so what, like now, let me, before I ask that question, so now what does your business look like now? Like what business have you built?
All right, that's awesome. So we've kind of got like 3 businesses that are under one banner, which is interesting. So what I ended up doing in order to like generate our own kind of revenue was finding property deals for other people. So that's called, in the UK, we call that property sourcing. In the US, you guys call it like wholesaling. That's the kind of strategy that's used in the US. So when I first got serious about real estate, 2004, 2005, there was no one in the UK teaching the creative stuff. So I learned a lot of my stuff from Americans, Australians, and I had to kind of interpret it into British, which is why I know a lot of how the American kind of wholesaling or real estate thing is. So we started doing property sourcing. That was helping us to generate a first level of income. Then from there, we started realizing, hold on a minute, the key is not money. The key is actually cash flow. If you want to replace an income, there's only 3 types of money you can make in property. Not there's only 3 ways you can make money, but there are only 3 types of money. And those 3 are very quickly equity, which is money stuck in bricks. Now, An example is 2017, we bought a house valued at 240K. We were able to buy it for 136. So that's 100,000, well, over 100,000 of a discount. Now, that 100,000 is great. We do that 10 times in a year. We'll become millionaires, but we're equity millionaires, which means we can't take that 100,000 to a Bentley showroom and buy a Bentley. Like the 100,000 is money stuck in bricks. So that's equity. Then you get profits. Obviously, Jim Rohn used to say profits are better than wages. And the thing with profits is their issue is they're only a one-time liquidated revenue. So you can buy a house for 100,000, refurbish that house for 20,000. Let's say we change the garage into a bedroom, and you can sell that house for 150,000. Yes, you just made 30,000, but if you're trying to replace the income, you have to do all that work again every single year, and maybe even 2 times a year if you're on some of the salaries we were on. So profits are great, but you never make another dollar, another cent, another pound from the property after it's sold. So then we started realizing that the third type of money is the key type of money, is cash flow. That's the residual recurring revenue that you have at your disposal every single God blessed month. So when we started realizing it was like, okay, we need to start getting some cash flowing assets. So we started applying strategies which are high cash flowing strategies. So by using those strategies, we were taking on properties and generating over £1,000 every single month. And we were using different strategies to do that. The main one is like effectively property management. We would call it property management. In the UK, we have a strategy called rent to rent, where you're basically renting a property from an original landlord, and then you're converting that property for a different usage and then renting it out to a new set of tenants. So that strategy was one of the core strategies we used to build a portfolio fairly quickly. And when you've got like 7 or 8 of those properties generating £1,000 a month, like it's very simple to become financially free in a short period of time.
And you don't need a lot of money to start that either, because you just
No. Of course, you got it.
I forget what that's called in America.
You do not need a lot of money to start that at all. So
it's like an arbitrage.
Boom. So that's exactly what we call it. Property arbitrage. So we basically built that business, and then after building that business, or whilst building that business, at the same time, one of the organizations I ended up getting connected with was a networking organization. They were the largest property investment networking organization in the UK. So they had 50 networking events across the UK. And because I had done one of their high level courses, like £20,000 course, they asked me whilst I was on the course to become a host of one of their networking events. So I agreed, and over a period of time, I ended up hosting the largest property networking event in the whole of the UK. So this event would attract over 100 people every single month coming to my networking event, all interested in property. So when I started doing that, I'd have people reach out to me personally and be like, Samuel, you need to teach me what you're doing, because from your networking event, I can see you're a great teacher. Not only are you doing this stuff, but you can actually explain things in ways these other guys aren't explaining it. Can you help me? So then we started coaching, and then we built our coaching business. So they're the 3 kind of layers of the business: the sourcing, finding assets for other investors. Then we transitioned into building our own portfolio. And then outside of that, also coaching, training, and assisting other people to become financially free.
You aren't wrong. You're a great teacher. He was under his breath over here going, that's the greatest description I've ever heard of that.
So the money stuck in bricks. I love that description. It's so it's such a tangible, like, you got money, but it's all stuck in bricks. Like you can't do anything with it.
That's the good teacher in that.
Well, I know that, but it's such a, like, I've never heard anybody describe it that way. And it's like the best word picture you could ever just have. Like you can't.
Thank you for choosing to interview us.
I love it. I love it because I love real estate too, right? Like
we haven't gotten super involved in it yet, but
I've always it's always been.
It's actually the first course you ever bought.
Yeah, I bought a real estate course, right? And then I probably didn't do as much as I should have with it, but it wasn't my path to start, right? And that's okay. It will come back around and it'll serve me, but and it's all good, but I don't know. It was just a great, like, I can just see somebody trying to like carry all these bricks to pay for something, and it's like, I don't want all that. Like, go away. Like, I can't handle that, right? Like,
Robbi, you were going to say something too.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you.
I was just going to say the interesting thing was that when Samuel was doing all the hosting for that company, again, I stopped seeing him as often, and it kind of was like, we're back there again, where you're working for someone and they're using you so much, and we stopped seeing you as much, isn't it? Because you were at event after event after event, networking here, networking there.
That, I think, just to interject, because I think this is helpful for people tuning in. It's like that element, because in my mind, I'm like, I only had a networking event where we only had an event once a month. But what happened was because I was hosting my event once a month, people started to realize, oh, he's a great speaker.
Yeah.
So then I started getting invited to speak in different places. And then again, going back to that addiction, it was kind of like, I need to fill my calendar. Maybe the crisis management, like Zak was talking about. So I was speaking out at so many different places about real estate, which again, created that vacuum of not necessarily being at home for the family.
And you weren't getting remunerated.
Yeah,
how you
and
should have
a
been.
lot of those events were not necessarily, even when they were paid, they weren't properly paid events. So
You know what's interesting? You're talking about these different addictions that we get from, and not traditional addictions, but addictions to salaries and stuff. Myron, who we both obviously know pretty well, he always says, build your business around your life. And so basically, like, what serves you at the highest level and your clients at the highest level, right? Well, it's funny, I think, because when you're saying it in my head, I was like, because of our past addictions and the way we've been taught, we don't actually do that. We build it around what we think we should instead of what we actually desire. So do you feel like you kind of went through that, and like, it seems like Robbi's your like compass. She's like, no, come back over here. This way. Like, so do you feel like you kind of did that, but now do you feel like your business is built the way that it serves you and your family? And
100%, certainly. Like, I feel as though it's like anything. It's like the Bible talks about a husband and wife. Like, when a man, you know, marries his wife, he'll leave his father and mother and they'll cleave to his wife, and the two become one flesh. I feel like, you know, there's a lot of people with like, oh, their partner is their better half or their other half. Like, biblically speaking, we understand like the partner's not supposed to be another half. They're supposed to be another whole. And if you're whole and they're whole, then you end up producing exponential results, right? So to me, it's like, that's what happened here. It's like, yes, I'm whole in all the things I'm great at, and Robbi's whole in all the things she's great at. And she's got superpowers in the area of discernment. Like, and when I say that, it's like she will just meet people or hear someone or hear how they speak and be like, no, this person's no good for us. Like, we got to go on a different path. Like, we can help them, but like that's not where we're going. And like, I just feel as though that's been really, really helpful over the years. And like any relationship, over time, you learn to know, like, and trust the person in that relationship more or less in order for you to lean on their gifts more or less. And I feel like over time, like, that's what's happened. Like, we've now been married over 10 years, and there's things that I just know, like, okay, Robbi's the go-to when it comes to this. And she knows, oh, Samuel's the go-to when it comes to that, because of that building up of the relationship. So
I love that. I love that. We were married in 2011, so we're almost the same amount as you. But so that brings me to one of the last questions. I had a couple questions to end with, and one of them was as couples, right? Like, that you're a couple that does business together and you have different parts within that business. Like, can you speak a little bit to what that looks like and what advice you'd give to other entrepreneurial couples that are doing that together? And you did kind of just there, but anything to add, or if Robbi has something to add?
That's awesome. So I'll take it all the way back. So just before we got married, so one of the things that happened to me when I was 11 years old, my mom used to drag me to church. And I remember close to nothing that was ever shared when I was dragged to church as a child, except one particular message. There was one day I was sat in the church, my mom dragged me there, and the man at the front on the stage, he said, look, there's 3 main causes of divorce. Now, the reason I probably heard this is because 5 years before that, when I was 6 years old, my dad and mom got divorced. And he started to speak about what they were. And I didn't think I really took the message in, but it was like, okay, cool. Fast forward to when Robbi and I are courting and preparing to get married. I said to her, we was literally planning our wedding. I was like, okay, we're not getting married unless we have 3 conversations. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, how are you going to just stop our process for these 3 things you ain't even told me about? And I said to her, well, look, when I was young, I was told there's 3 main causes of divorce. So if we're getting married, my mom and dad got divorced. I don't want us to get divorced. Robbi's mom and dad got divorced. I don't want, we don't want that. That's the track record that's been set for us, and we don't want to follow it. So I said, let's talk about these 3 things. So one of the things out of the 3 things was, the pastor said, goals and visions, or goals and dreams. So what we did before we got married is we sat down for an hour and a half, pen and paper, journal in hand, and we wrote down every single goal we wanted to achieve for the rest of our life. After we did that for an hour and a half, we then spent a second hour and a half, which made a complete 3 hours, sharing with each other everything we wrote down. How many children we wanted, what kind of house we want to live in, the kind of money we want to make, like all of that stuff. And it's interesting because that for us was one of the key ways that we realized how important property and real estate was to us.
Yeah.
Because it was when we did that, like we didn't write property 100 times, but what happened was we realized that 90, maybe 80, a high percentage of those results would be produced if we cracked just the property code.
Yeah.
So just having written down, oh, we want to own our own home, oh, we want to have rental property, like we realized, hold on, we can't homeschool if we both work full-time jobs. So even though we got married, went into these full-time jobs, we always knew that from the goals workshop we had done, property was going to be essential to this. So coming back to your question, Laura, what I would say is if you're a couple and you're thinking about, okay, how can we win in business together? How can we work at a higher level together in business? The first thing I would always advise a couple to do is have your goals outlined.
Yeah.
And not just like when we did our goals workshop, it wasn't, oh, what do you want to write? No, it was literally you sit over there, I'm sitting over here. We're both going to be silent and write as much as we can on all the goals we want to achieve. And then we're going to dialogue. Because obviously the benefit we had is we were doing this just before we got married. So we'd been raised in different homes, raised on different paths. And now we were kind of saying, okay, what do we want our future path to look like?
Yeah.
So if a couple's already been married for 4 or 5 years, you know, it's going to be like easy for like probably 40%, depending on the style of their marriage, but it's going to be easy for like 40 to 50% of that stuff to be the same. With Robbi and I, what was powerful was that activity cemented our marriage for us before we were married, because we saw how much stuff we had written down similar, which we had never spoken about.
Did the same thing.
There you go. So we had both written down homeschooling. We both written down like we wanted to do stuff in property. We both wrote down like just our educational goals. So that was really, really empowering. So I would say if a couple's looking at working together, first and foremost, get aligned. Like understand what you're both doing, why you're doing it, and what your plan is. The next thing is like, this is something I've been learning recently, more so in terms of actually doing, not just hearing about, but become very outcome focused. You see, I think there's too many people, human beings, and we get this from our school system, who are process focused, not outcome focused. Like, oh, we have to do this, then 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 we have to do this, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about, oh, I'll become a teacher so I can learn what God, you know, wants me to do about becoming someone who can deliver value in the marketplace from a ministry perspective. And over the years, what I realized is, no, God's called you to be a marketplace minister, which means wherever you go, you're going to minister. And all you've got to do is make sure you've got a word in season for people. And the best way you have a word in season for people is be in season with God. Like make sure you got an open ear to what he has to say. You've got an open heart to what he has to say. And then wherever you end up, you can deliver that value. And that for me was kind of like the real kind of foundation to me saying, okay, cool, I know I'm just going to walk this path. So for me, I'd say if couples are looking at working together, first and foremost, get on the same page by understanding what each other's goals are and dialoguing with each other about that, and then become outcome focused. Like, what are we trying to achieve? Okay, we want to have this kind of a house, or we want to do this with our children, or we want to have this kind of a lifestyle, similar to what you were saying earlier, Laura, about making the business work around your life. Because in 10 years from now, whatever business you've built, I assume you're building it for your life. So it only makes sense to build it around your life rather than build your life around the business. And then 10 years from now, you don't have a life because you gave up your life to have a business. So,
and it's
I
funny
love
because
that.
I was going to summarize my point by what you said already, which was get on the same page. So once you kind of got aligned in terms of your goals, now get on the same page. Like I'm the fun, like easy go person out of us two. Samuel's very much the serious one, you know, everything's got to be done by the book. And I found that challenging in our early stages of marriage because I was just like, can't we just relax, you know, let's just take it easy, like just chill out. And he was like, no, we need to have these free conversations. And I'm like, let's just get married and we'll talk about that later, Samuel. No, we got to do it. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So I reluctantly done a lot of the things that led up to us getting married because I was like, we didn't talk about money in my family. We didn't do this in my family. We weren't serious like that in our family. We just kind of, my dad's like a big time comedian. Not paid one, I mean like just at home. And he's always joking about something. So that's how I grew up. My dad wasn't a serious guy and, you know, didn't give me like massive words of wisdom. But then you meet Samuel's dad and he's very, you know, wise and just amazing. And I could see where Samuel got it from, but I was kind of like, no, can we just relax? Like, he's like, let's talk about our finances. Let's, you know, get a financial structure. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so it was, Samuel's amazing because he had to get me through this restriction of, nah, I don't want to do it. And It was later on when looking back, I was like, wow, imagine if we never did that financial structure. Imagine if we never had the goals workshop. Imagine if we never done all these things. Like so many people said, the first year of marriage is going to be hard. Okay, Robbi, it's going to be hard. We've never had a bad year of marriage. We've thoroughly enjoyed being married to each other. And I know it's because we did the hard work first. And so the easy part came after. And for me, again, I got to the stage of being reluctant to work in the business. I was kind of like, no, I'm just a mum, that's all I'm good for. Like, let me just be a mum. And he's like, no, I want us to work together. And I'm like, I don't want to. And then Samuel said, get a coach and, start to believe what I can see in you. And I'm like, so I can see all this greatness in him. And he's saying, I can see the greatness in you. And I'm like, no, not me. So that's how we ended up meeting Coach Laura Lyles. And I then was able to say, do you know what? I can see how I can work with my husband in our business. So my advice is not only get aligned, but get on the same page so that you're working together, you're working towards the same thing. And the scripture that comes to mind is Amos 3:3, which is how can two walk together unless they be agreed. So get on the same page. I definitely say get on the same page.
And I love you guys didn't say this, but you're acting like you're showing it. Is appreciating and knowing the gifts that the other person brings. And Samuel, you said it earlier, like when it's their role, let them play their role. And when it's your role, play your role. Like, I love that. I love how you guys do that. You can just tell that you guys do that. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So the last question I have for you guys is, it's kind of a two-part question. One, if people are interested, where can they find you? But then two, like what closing words would you have for people who are, maybe they're starting out in entrepreneurship or thinking about it. Maybe they're in the side business thing, like what words of advice would you have for them? And then obviously, where can people find you as well?
Let me share first. There you go. All right, cool. So it's interesting you asked this, Laura, because there's so many things that are like from our conversation that have just come to my mind and I think are so pertinent to be shared. So one of the things, like Zak was talking earlier about the word picture of money stuck in bricks, never heard it like that. And the thing that's interesting is some of our highest level coaching clients are people just like that. They're people who have got, like, what I call them is property rich and cash poor. So they've and the thing is, for people who aren't active in real estate or property, they might not understand that that's a thing, but that's a major thing. Like, there are hundreds of thousands of people across the globe who have probably millions. Like, I know someone who's got double-digit millions of pounds of property, but literally each month is wondering how he's going to pay his bills. So it's a big thing. So what I would say is, like, one of the things we have to start to understand is that, like, coaching is the fastest path to success. Like, this is something I learned young, and I'm grateful. Like Robbi mentioned my dad. My dad was literally like my coach, and I never knew. Like, coaching is the fastest path to success. And I say it all the time, like, every professional has a coach, and it's what separates professionals from amateurs. So, for example, Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, she had a coach. Venus Williams, her sister, another great tennis player of all time, she had a coach. You see the same thing in golf. Tiger Woods had a coach. Same thing, Michael Jordan. They've recently just said LeBron's hit some new accolade. All of these people have coaches. So one of the things I realized is coaching is the fastest path to success, because you have someone who watches you play your game at your highest level and can give you feedback to help you play your game at a higher level. So for me, if there's anyone who's thinking about, taking a step out of just the side hustle thing into the real, I'm going to build a business, or if there's anyone who's saying to themselves, you know what, I've just been challenged working this job, and you know what, I know it's not for me. Like, the reality for all of those people is get yourself a coach, get yourself someone who can see a higher level than what you're currently living. So as you play your game at whatever level you believe is the highest, they can pull you higher and say, come on higher, come on higher. There's more inside of you. You can do more. So that's what I'd say to anyone who's tuning in, listening to this conversation and saying, you know what, I want to work with my spouse. Okay, get yourself a coach. Like, if you don't start with a coach communally, i.e. for both of you, start with a coach individually. Like, and we did that. Like, there was years, like, I was listening to Jim Rohn 2004, 2005. I've been reading books like Allowing Books to Coach Me by John Maxwell and all of these other authors for years. And I was saying to Robbi for years, for close to 10 years, like, get yourself a coach. So the reality is, this that people see now or people hear now is a byproduct of that. It's a byproduct of transformational coaching. Like when Robbi says, "Oh, Samuel was patient and he brought me over to this side." Yeah, what I did is I coached her transformationally.
100%.
But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't have had that done to myself.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say coaching is the fastest path to success. Get yourself a coach, get someone who's going to love on you and pour their wisdom, their insight, their hindsight, insight, and foresight into you so you can move forward as well. So that's the first thing. And yeah, in terms of connecting with us, like we coach people, and interestingly enough, it's transformational coaching that gets people from being property rich and cash poor to being cash rich and property rich. So we do all of that. So yeah, people can connect with us on Instagram. We're on every social media platform, but on Instagram, Samuel and Robbi. And then there's so Samuel I Can Win if you want to connect with me personally. And
Robbi without me. Robbi.
ROBBI.
We'll make sure they're in the descriptions. We'll get them
Yeah,
from you too.
we'll get all that stuff.
Just have go ahead, finish your thought first.
So that's it. So you guys can connect with us. We've got YouTube and whatever it is. Just reach out. I'm sure there'll be links somewhere here.
Yeah, we'll put links down there. You guys have a challenge as well, don't you?
Yes.
I don't know if that is open all the time or not, but if people are interested, where would they go for something like that? If it's open, I don't know.
That's a great question. So we have a 5-day cash flow creation challenge. And all those days of that challenge are all about how you create more cash flow for your future. And like one of the big things for us is legacy. Like how can you actually live the lifestyle you want to live?
Nice.
How can you have the legacy you need to live? And the answer is you just need to use leverage that you haven't known about in school. So we literally spend those 5 days teaching people about how to leverage these key cornerstones of life in order for them to use resources and revenues, which I say are hidden in plain sight, because they're literally hidden in plain sight, in order to create consistent or colossal cash flow. So you can come if you're interested to cashflowcreationchallenge.com and join us on our next upcoming challenge. And we generally run them fairly regularly in order to allow people to get a space on them. So yeah, don't take time, just jump on if it's for you.
Very cool.
I am sure that it's a fantastic challenge.
Zach might have to jump on just because.
Yeah, for sure.
It is. I might say so myself. It is a great challenge.
I'm 100% sure.
Awesome. And Robbi, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have anything else you wanted to share before we closed?
No. But actually, yes. I'm saying no. Yes. It was kind of just to say that before I had an official coach, Samuel was my coach, and he kind of said it already, but he'd done that whole transformation thing with me. And I'd just like to encourage spouses to allow their husbands, I guess that's the correct way, isn't it? Not just spouses, but allow your husbands to coach you sometimes, because, that's what God's put them there for. Your husbands are meant to lead. So, yes. Just
Love it.
Women to do that.
So good.
Awesome. I love it. I appreciate you guys. I love your heart. I love what you guys are doing. I'm excited to watch you continue to grow and continue to watch God use you as a couple and use you both individually and your families. I know you're raising a bunch of mighty men and women over there, so that's amazing. So awesome. Well, thanks for spending this time with us, and we'll make sure that all the descriptions are below. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye for now.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you check out this video right here.
Right here.
And in that video, we share with you how you can use your skills and your knowledge to build your very own business. Check it out.